Bueno, gente, bienvenidos un día más a OnlyRams. Necesito una rima para OnlyRams. A ver qué tipo de frase podríamos poner. Dejádmelo en los comentarios porque, no sé, tengo dudas. Pero bueno, bienvenidos a un nuevo vídeo. Vamos a ver este vídeo que me ha salido en recomendados, ¿vale? Que se llama ¿Cómo Markelle Fultz perdió la habilidad de tirar? El misterio más grande de la historia de la NBA. No sé si lo sabéis, pero Markelle Fultz, supongo que muchos, los que seáis más frikis de la NBA seguramente sabréis quién es. Los que seáis más casos, pues seguramente no sonará mucho ese nombre. Fue número 1 del draft. Es decir, quedó el número 1 por encima de Lonzo, Jason Tatum, Adebayo, Donovan Mitchell, entre otros. O sea, ojo ese draft que está siendo una locura ahora, que está viendo pues además muchos rumores ahora con Donovan Mitchell, que se va a otro equipo, Jason Tatum que ha llegado a las finales de la NBA, Lonzo que está en los Bulls ahora mismo sacándose pues todo lo que viene siendo el rabazo. Pues Markelle Fultz fue el número 1, apuntaba unas maneras increíbles, pero de golpe se lesionó y resulta que perdió la habilidad de tirar, o sea, se le olvidó tirar. Es el jugador que olvidó cómo tirar a canasta, siendo número 1 del draft. Es un misterio increíble, bueno, misterio en verdad no es tanto, pero algo tuvo que pasar por ahí. Vamos a ver este vídeo, a ver cómo lo explica, a ver qué explica, y así podemos saber qué pasó con el número 1 del draft que se olvidó de cómo tirar a canasta, o sea, olvidó cómo tirar a canasta. Es que me parece muy fuerte, ¿eh? Me parece muy vasto, pero bueno, vamos a ver el vídeo.
Philadelphia 76ers select Markelle Fultz from the University of Washington.
Es que es número 1 del draft. Mirad cómo tiraba, ¿eh?
I hate to be the one to say this, but you know, he's been a bust for them.
Encima, le hicieron... Le copiaron, o sea, le hicieron burlas, ¿eh?
I hate to be the one
Hacía así, se tocaba así y luego tiraba. Era súper raro, tío. Mira, ¿veis? Hacía como así y tiraba raro, tío. Es que fue con él, Embiid y tal, cómo empezó el trust the process. O sea, claro, todo el mundo decía, guau, con Markelle Fultz vamos a reventarlo, Ben Simmons, Embiid, todo eso fue cuando empezó tal, pero de golpe Fultz se fue a la verga. ¿Qué hace? Es que mirad cómo tiraba, tío. A ver qué pasó, ¿eh? Es que es raro, es muy raro, tío.
In all my years of watching the NBA, no story of a player has ever stuck with me like Markelle Fultz's has. There's so many theories regarding what happened and how it transpired. So many layers that extend past his basketball life.
Es que mirad cómo jugaba en la universidad. Es que jugaba muy bien, tío. Se jugaba muy bien. Si hubiera estado como jugó antes de la lesión que tuvo, esos Sixers ahora, a día de hoy, serían imparables prácticamente. Tendrían un super base como Fultz, un base alero como Ben Simmons, que también tenía lo suyo, y Embiid, que está, bueno, increíble. O sea, que por cierto, Embiid, me has fallado. Me caías bien. Ahora eres confirmado francés. Entonces, ahora lo siento mucho, pero por ser español y todos los que somos de España te tenemos que odiar. No nos caes mal y eres un tío que nos haces mucha gracia en redes sociales y demás, y además eres muy bueno jugando, pero es que ahora eres francés, ya oficial. El tío ha cogido la nacionalidad francesa. Te tenemos que odiar, ¿vale? Está escrito en el ADN español. Los españoles tenemos que odiar a los franceses. Entonces, lo siento mucho, Embiid, nos caes bien, pero te tenemos que odiar. Lo siento mucho. Mira, es que tiraba bien.
There's no definitive moment in the entirety of Fultz's saga that you can point to and say, this is where it all went wrong. However, you can notice small details here and there that snowballed over time until it was too late. The shoulder injury may have taken the attention, but they won't tell you the full story. That's where I come in. This is the real story about the rise and fall of Markelle Fultz.
Ojo, el ascenso y la caída de Markelle Fultz. Número 1 del draft, Número 1 del draft. Y de ahí a uno de los mayores fracasos. One of the best high schools for athletes. What many don't remember about this time is that just 2 years previously, Fultz was cut from his sophomore team. He took this personally and worked even harder on his skills, eventually making it to the varsity team. He then dominated, took over the high school scene, and asserted himself as one of the best players in the nation. Markelle had plenty of accomplishments. Bueno, está bien, historia de superación al final, ¿no? At such a young age, so the choices for college seemed widespread, with many big names on the horizon. Despite this, he ended up choosing Washington. O sea, le cortaron de uno de los equipos del instituto y terminó número 1 del draft. O sea, ojo, Y siendo base, además siendo base, que los bases a veces
Roy. What's interesting to note is that all of these players weren't the best in their class. Roy was the 6th pick in the 2006 draft.
Qué bueno, qué bueno tú. Qué bueno Brandon Roy.
Fellow guards of that draft class, like De'Aaron Fox and Lonzo Ball, chose Kentucky and UCLA, which were much more known and successful. What gives? To Markelle, when he entered the gym, it was simply love at first sight, and Washington offered him a contract months before the other schools. That's understandable, but also thought-provoking. The top player in the nation chose a school that hadn't qualified for the NCAA tournament.
Ojo, el mejor jugador de la nación, de su edad, no eligió una universidad que se clasificara para la NCAA. En 6 años, quiero decir. Es que era muy bueno, tío.
He was a terrific finisher with poster dunks and flashy layups every night. And perhaps
mira, es que vaya mates, tío. Como una persona que juega así se olvida de tirar, Mira, y mira cómo tiraba. Es que tiraba bien. Contra Alonso, además, Partió contra Alonso y mira, tirando por encima de la gente. Y luego no puede tirar un tiro libre. En un 6'4", 1'93".
What's important to highlight is that at this time in every single mock draft, Fultz was at the top. Not top point guard, top player overall. It's easy to look back now with
mira qué tiro, tío.
The bold claim that Jason Tatum should have gone first overall, but evidence from 2017 shows otherwise. The Washington Huskies.
O sea, apuntaba que tenía que ser Jason Tatum el número 1. Vosotros, a día de hoy, está claro, debería haber sido Tatum el número 1, pero bueno.
Not even cracking the tournament, and all eyes went to the man himself regarding this. If he was so good, then how come his team lost so much? Fultz fans pointed out.
Hostia, perdieron un montón,
talent, which is true. And the basketball world paid no mind to this losing record because the 2017 draft was fastly approaching. The 2017 draft lottery took place with the Boston Celtics landing the top slot. They kept this pick for about a month when suddenly, out of nowhere, they traded down with the Sixers, receiving.
Hostia, los Boston, qué bien hicieron, chaval, Boston Celtics le cambió el número 1 del draft a los Sixers. Tremendo.
Fans immediately began criticizing Boston general manager Danny Ainge for making such.
Danny Ainge, bueno, ya no es Danny Ainge el general manager, ahora es Brad Stevens.
We truly don't know why the Celtics made this decision. They could have just been that infatuated with Jason Tatum.
O sea, sabían seguramente que el número 1 tenía que ser Markelle Fultz, pero a ellos les gustaba Tatum.
Offensively polished forward from Duke. Either that or they could have seen something wrong with Markelle Fultz. He struggled badly in his workout with the C's. His shot form looked fine, but the end result was a clank off the rim. Other fans love pointing to Fultz's free throw percentage as a reason that we should have been concerned.
65% de tiros libres.
They claim the true way to determine if somebody is a shooter is by their free throws, which I agree with. However, when Fultz arrived in the league, it's not that he couldn't make threes, but that he was physically incapable of shooting jump shots at all. We'll never know.
Es que era incapaz de tirar tiros. Es que me parece muy fuerte esto, tío.
As they had a chance to form a dynasty.
Es que lo que podía haber sido esto, tío. Es que lo que podía haber sido esto si no se hubiera lesionado.
Fultz, Simmons, Embiid. 2 number 1 picks and 1 third pick who had shown flashes of greatness. Markelle had another terrible workout with Philly just a few days before the draft, but now it was far too late to think anything of that. You'd already given up the assets to get here. Fultz's trainer excused this by simply saying the kid was nervous, which made sense at the time.
A ver, hostia, fue 4 de 18. 4 de 18 en un entrenamiento con Filadelfia prácticamente días antes del draft. O sea, ya no había vuelta atrás. Claro, el cabrón tenía ya las cartas echadas, pues ya está. También tiene razón, o sea, al final no tienes que descartarlo porque haya entrenado mal cuando él ha estado todo el año haciéndolo bien.
The NBA world exploded into excitement as Markelle walked towards the stage in his big moment. a few interesting words were uttered by Reese Davis, the ESPN draft analyst.
An avid BMX biker, and now he loves to throw caution to the wind. And
Did you catch that?
an avid BMX biker.
An avid BMX biker. This sentence is often referenced by many when the question of what happened arises. The theory goes as followed. Fultz, being a big fan of biking, injured his shoulder and refused
¡Ah, que tuvo un accidente con la bici!
of the Sixers organization, so his contract wouldn't be voided. I find this theory to be incorrect. Had this motor accident been the case, structural damage would have been found in Fultz's shoulder. However, the Sixers stated multiple times that this wasn't the case, and there wasn't anything damaged in his shoulder.
Que no tenía daño en el hombro, madre mía. O sea, yo creo que los Sixers estaban como en plan, hay que defenderlo de cualquier manera. O sea, voy con todo a defenderlo. Yo creo que hasta que ya no hubo vuelta atrás, hasta que ya fue a tirar un tiro libre y dijeron, ¿esto qué cojones es?
Crumbles this theory to pieces. In other news, Jason Tatum, the player Philly essentially traded Fultz for, talked in his draft interview. He said that Boston would have taken him with the #1 pick had they not traded.
Claro, si tanto querían a Tatum, ¿por qué no lo seleccionaron en el número 1? Es que hay tanta presión por parte de medios, por parte de toda la NBA y tal, que quieren que sea el número 1 ese jugador y no Tatum, porque podría haber sido Tatum perfectamente, ¿no? Pero bueno, oye, se llevaron el gato al agua. Imagínate que los Sixers, por lo que sea, draftean. Claro, tenían el 3 y se lo cambiaron a Boston por el 1. El 2 estaba claro que iba a ser Lonzo, porque Lakers quería a Lonzo. Y el 3 iba a ir... Hostia, iba a ir a Filadelfia Tatum, tío. Lo que hubiera sido eso, Tatum, Embiid y Ben Simmons. Me cago encima, chaval.
Sixers and NBA fans alike mocked this statement, because at the time it sounded ludicrous. This once again puts into question, why did Danny Ainge feel so strongly about skipping on Fultz? Fast forward to Summer League. The first game on the board was
Primer partido de la Summer League, que de hecho, a día de que estoy grabando esto, se está haciendo ahora la Summer League.
Fultz versus Tatum, and fans were excited. The two young guns battled it out. Fultz had flashed.
Estos partidos molan mucho, cuando toca en la Summer League el número 1 contra el 2, el número 1 contra el 3, el 2 contra el 3. Los 5 primeros picks del draft se enfrentan en la Summer League, mola mucho.
Tatum threw down dunks. It was looking like a future rivalry was setting.
Qué guapo esto,
Jason Tatum, however, got the last laugh, hitting a long jumper to win the game. Overall, Markelle played well, but was inefficient. He was sloppy and turned it over quite a bit, although that was expected from a young player in his first ever game. On the other hand, Markelle looked poised.
A tablero, tú.
Jumpers, hitting this smooth mid-range J, or Hezzy pull-up Jimbo, as Kevin Durant tweeted. The defense was fantastic as well.
Hasta Kevin Durant, que decía, ojo, Kevin Durant también decía que era top.
Well, the blocked shots by Markelle were highlight worthy, showing the elite defensive potential. In all of those great moments,
Buenos tapones, que defendía bien también, tío.
Fultz saga began to fall. Take a look at the jump shot in these clips. Not bad looking at all, but different from the form he had at Washington.
Es verdad, se ve distinto, es como que el brazo se le movía, ¿no?
As before. The next game against the Jazz, he continued to play well, dropping 23 points with a flurry of more jump shots. The form was still visibly different than
Es verdad, es distinta.
Going in, nobody seemed to notice. His
Es verdad.
game was when the next domino fell. Against the Warriors, Fultz was incredibly aggressive in the paint, driving every single time. Then, as he went up for a block, he came down hard and injured his ankle.
Se lesionó el tobillo. Sí, el tobillo.
Injuries happen, and this specific ankle wasn't some sort of a threat to his health at all. The real problem here is that by sustaining this injury, he was no longer playing, and the Sixers as a team wouldn't be able to fully monitor him until the season began a few months.
Claro, al final se lesiona, no puede jugar la Summer League y tienes que esperar a que ya esté para la temporada.
In the impending season, something went horribly wrong for Markelle Fultz. Throughout his time in a Sixers uniform so far, his form visually seemed fine, but he wasn't taking as many jump shots as when he was in college. In fact, that final game against the Warriors saw him only shooting one jumper, a moving mid-range bucket. These shooting and jump shot issues didn't begin after the ankle injury, but before it. quite possibly during the draft. There were many rumors supporting the idea that he never wanted to come to Philly in the first place, so when he heard the news of the Sixers moving up to draft him, that could have been a tough pill to swallow.
O sea que no quería ir a los Philadelphia.
Tanking to the top by Yaron Weitzman adds more ammo to the mental hurdles Markelle had to go through. He had a fight with his mother, then went to the gym and his form looked horrendous.
¿Cómo discutió con su madre y luego fue a jugar y ya su forma ya se veía horrible? ¿Qué cojones está ocurriendo aquí? No, esto es impresionante.
The Sixers' assistant coach at the time worked with Fultz on an off day after Summer League had closed. I've never seen anything like that before, Pierce said to colleagues after the workout.
Me acuerdo de esto, ¿eh? De esto me acuerdo. Después de la Summer League, el chico dijo, "The kid can't shoot". O sea, el muchacho no puede tirar.
This kid can't shoot. None of this had made the news though. Nobody really knew about Fultz's problems, so he went to the only person.
Es que imagínate, acaba la Summer League, el número 1 del draft, promete que flipa, se lesiona. Es decir, tienes que esperar a que acabe la Summer League para verlo jugar. Y de golpe ves que el entrenador dice, no puede tirar.
His longtime trainer, Keith Williams. Keith had been training Fultz for years, so when Markelle came to him and said that he believed somebody was holding down his arms as he was lifting to shoot.
Hostia, él lo que notaba es como que alguien le cogía de los brazos hacia abajo y por eso no podía tirar. Así que no le dejaba levantarlos.
Fix this issue, one of which was him shooting while lying on the gym floor, or dribbling the ball into his shot to create a rhythm. We don't know what effect this training had on Fultz or his shot, but it certainly wasn't positive. October 18th, 2017 was the first game of Markelle Fultz's
El debut de Markelle.
and it was a complete mess. Don't get me wrong, he showed flashes with his finishing ability and defense, but it seemed like throughout it all, he was a shadow of his former self. One
O sea que no lo hizo mal, pero algo pasó.
of jump shots was present. He shot one the entire game. This off-balance mid-range two-pointer looked great actually, and gave Sixers
Es un buen
fans
tiro.
hope that Markelle could eventually return to his old ways. We now know that Fultz has always been better with moving off-balance shots. The precise reason for this is undetermined, but it's a mix of him
Claro, luego estuvo en Orlando,
shooting
que no lo hizo del todo mal en Orlando, ¿eh?
shots. And perhaps the worst moment of the game. Fultz was fouled, driving inside, and shot two of the worst free throws I've ever seen in my life.
Es que cuando pasó esto fue increíble, tío. Me acuerdo de verlo en Twitter en todos lados, decir, ¿qué ha pasado con ese tiro libre? O sea, ¿qué le pasa?
Laugh at a professional basketball player having the shot of a child, but just think about it for a moment. This was a 19-year-old rookie, someone who was selected #1 overall, with monumental expectations of being the finishing piece for a franchise. A guy who was an absolute sharpshooter.
Es que es eso, ¿eh? 19 años, número 1 del draft, confiando en él para construir una dinastía.
Shoulders, and is still voluntarily playing games to try and help his team. This pattern of shooting woes continued for a few more games until Fultz was yanked from the team and listed as out for the foreseeable future. The Sixers said he had...
Es que ha tirado el tiro libre, ha cogido el rebote, ha tirado como por tirar y tampoco ha tocado ni aro, tío.
fancy way for saying his shoulder just wasn't right. There was also word from his
Algo de la escápula, ¿no?
brothers that Fultz had fluid taken out of his shoulder. This was then changed to having fluid put in his shoulder. There seemed to be no understanding of what was going on. With all of this happening, the Sixers general manager, Brian Colangelo, said that there was nothing wrong physically with Fultz.
Es que lo de los Sixers no lo entiendo, te lo juro, ¿eh? Hacen cosas más raras los Sixers, tío. Es que no lo entiendo, te lo prometo. No entiendo qué hacen los Sixers. Tienes que defender bueno, claro, obviamente tienes que taparlo para no perder valor, ¿no? Pero, tío, es que es evidente, es que se está viendo. Está casi mejor que digas, estamos estudiando el caso de Markelle Fultz. Punto, ya está. Pero que digas, no hay ningún problema. Tío, se ha visto. O sea, tiró un tiro libre como un niño pequeño.
There were moments in the recovery process where NBA media members forgot he was human, to the point where fellow veteran teammate JJ Redick had to explicitly tell them to leave Fultz alone.
First, thank you for that. You know, that was like another big brother moment that you stood up for me, and it made me feel even better.
Other
JJ Redick le cubrió.
basketball media began to hop on the Fultz criticism as well, some jumping to calling him a bust already. Throughout all of this, Fultz maintained that what was going on was an injury. His rookie season at this point was a complete disaster. 5 games played, and it seemed like he never get the chance to show what he was capable of.
Jugó 5 partidos en su época rookie.
That was the case until in late March of 2018, when Markelle went to the head coach at the time, Brett Brown, and told him, "I'm ready."
Markelle Fultz will play tonight. It was his decision. I mean, it's ridiculous what he's been through, and he understands it, and I understand it. You know, that's the scrutiny you get when somebody says.
Es que se le puso ya la etiqueta, tío. Él dijo que estaba preparado, ¿eh?
And with the first pick of the 2017 NBA draft, the Philadelphia 76ers select Markelle Fultz.
Markelle Fultz will play tonight. Those were the words that rang
Es literalmente el mismo caso de Bennett, ¿no? De Anthony Bennett.
across the NBA world. It was 5 months of absolute disaster, confusion, lost hope. Yet in just a normal regular season game against the Denver Nuggets, Fultz would suddenly be returning. In his first game back, he dropped 10 points and 8 assists.
Bueno, su primer partido después de volver, 10 puntos, 8 asistencias, está muy bien, no está mal.
You could see the potential begin to show. Hard drives to the rim, clever passes, and a smooth mid-range game. The only issue
De media distancia muy bien, pero el problema es...
there were no three-point attempts.
Claro, es que no tiraba de 3. Es que claro, no tiras de 3 y ya tienes a 2 jugadores que no te tiran de 3, que son Ben Simmons y Markelle Fultz. ¿Para qué lo quieres? Necesitas un base que te abra la pista, ¿sabes?
Brought this up, however, was quickly silenced because most were happy Fultz was playing at all. Philly ended up winning their last 9 games of the season. Markelle played okay, but there still weren't any three-pointers. And the free
Ganaron los 9 partidos, pero es lo que te digo, que no había ningún triple.
throw was still broken. Many were rightfully confused at why the same issues were still here.
Mira que bien, es que tiene... Era bueno, tío, de verdad que es bueno, de verdad.
Fixed with time. In the last game of the 2017-18 season, Fultz posted the youngest triple-double in NBA history with 12 points, 10 assists and 10 rebounds.
El triple doble más joven de la historia de la NBA, que si no me equivoco ya está roto.
Without a jump shot. At the end, when he grabbed his 10th board, he was mobbed by his teammates, showing how much they believed in the kid. It was a great thing to see.
Esto mola, esto mola.
To the playoffs, and Fultz
Playoffs.
plays, getting DNPs in the second round series versus Boston. The reason for this varied on who you asked. Philly claimed it was because Fultz needed more time before playing in the postseason, and others said it was because Fultz just wasn't good enough. The series against the Celtics had to be one of the most mentally challenging events a rookie could ever go through. Seeing Jason Tatum, the guy who was traded for you, drop bucket after bucket to eliminate your team, as you could do nothing but sit and watch.
3-1 iban ahí ya,
It was tough. As the Sixers
Tiene que ser duro, Tiene que ser bastante duro lo que dice. O sea, draftearon... Es que literalmente te cambiaron por Jason Tatum y ves como en los playoffs tú no juegas y él se está saliendo encima eliminándote.
but hope in the air. It was a wild season, so the offseason could be a time for everything to slow down and let Fultz recover to his full abilities. Remember, just 12 months ago, he was the top prospect in the nation. What if all he needed was some time?
Markelle Fultz contra Channing Tatum, ¿sabes? Los mismos, las mismas estadísticas.
And Joel Embiid discussed off-season training plans, and Embiid recommended Drew Hanlon as a trainer. Hanlon
Drew Hanlon yo lo sigo, ese entrenador es muy buen entrenador.
is known for training some of the best players in the game.
Este entrenador es muy buen entrenador, De hecho, este me parece que entrena a Embiid, a Tatum, a Bradley Beal, a Zach LaVine y no sé a quién más. Entrena y es muy bueno, Es muy bueno.
Embiid and Simmons were great and all, but none of this will work out unless Fultz truly develops into the player they hope he can.
Es que era lo que les faltaba Fultz.
2018-19 season, Markelle talks about his renewed confidence, how the summer was one of his hardest working, and that he was ready to become the third star. In the preseason, Fultz looked okay. His mid-range shot looked pure, which was reassuring. Plus, his finishing and playmaking was solid. He did make one three-pointer, the first of his NBA career, a corner wide open triple.
Su primer triple en la NBA, casi 3 años después.
Bad, a little on the slow side, but much better than the disaster that was his rookie season. The only issue is that
Bueno, 2 años después, casi 1 año
the
después.
shot was nothing like his college one. The form was slow and had a lower release point. Is this really a shot that he could shoot 40% from 3 with, like he did in college? The 2018-19 season began with monolithic expectations for Markelle. It was time to show that untapped potential.
Es la temporada de Luka.
Shooting. It all started in Boston, TD Garden, a rematch of last season's playoff series, and Philly's chance to get revenge. Unfortunately, Boston blew the Sixers out. Tatum shined and Fultz was invisible. He scored 5.
Hostia, que no hubo manera, ¿eh? Que no hubo manera de reventar a los Celtics, ¿eh? Los reventaron a ellos.
2 of 7 from the field.
2 de
and
7
one
hizo.
jump shot, which was an off-balance 2-pointer. This is when fans really began to get upset. How is it that after all of this time,
Vaya pase de
Markelle
Simmons, ¿eh?
still couldn't shoot any threes? Philly started out the season 8-5. Fultz looking mediocre with little to no three-pointers. He also made headlines for his wacky free throw forms, the infamous double pump, as well as whatever this is, was worrying. The Sixers were best.
O sea, tú cuando tiras, ¿no? Tú cuando tiras así, ¿no? Puedes tirar de cualquier manera, puedes tirar así, puedes tirar desde aquí como hacía Alonso, desde aquí como hace Trey Young casi, como tú quieras, desde aquí como hacía Kobe, no sé, eso ya da igual, pero al final es un movimiento que sigue una misma línea. Pero es que Markelle Fultz hacía así y tira, es que eso es imposible de mantener.
Which yanked Markelle out of the starting lineup and onto the bench.
Buah, es verdad, los Sixers que cogieron a
November
Butler.
19th, 2018 was Fultz's last game with the Sixers. His agent announced that they'd be looking for a shoulder specialist to diagnose an injury, and Markelle was out.
O sea, ¿me estás diciendo que en dos años o así no habéis pensado que igual tiene mal el hombro, por eso tira de esa manera? ¿De verdad esa gente tiene médicos, tiene especialistas detrás y nadie se ha dado cuenta de que lo más seguro es que sea algo del brazo? Cualquier parte del brazo. Primero miras el codo, miras la mano, miras el hombro. No, porque al final es eso. Entonces, ¿qué estás mirando? ¿Qué piensa? ¿Que se le ha olvidado de golpe? Nada, es que se me ha olvidado no sé qué, me he despertado al día siguiente, no sé tirar. O sea, ¿en qué momento dices tú? Nah, yo creo que es momento de ir a un especialista. Pero si tendrías que haber ido desde el minuto 1.
The weird part about all of this is that Fultz was hitting mid-range shots at a solid clip. There were some games when he hit multiple 15-footers, so why couldn't that translate to three-pointers? Right after the Suns game, Fultz talked with Allen Iverson. You gotta wonder if AI told him to trust his body and sit out. A few weeks later, he was diagnosed with thoracic outlet syndrome.
Síndrome de la salida torácica.
It's a condition that affects the shoulder. Some were skeptical as they believed Fultz's team made up this injury to mask the fact he simply forgot how to shoot. Others were happy that his injury.
Es que es imposible que haya olvidado cómo tirar, tío. Es un tío que es el número 1 del draft, que hizo muy buenos porcentajes en la universidad y que tira bien de media distancia y de golpe de triple pues no llega. A lo mejor pues algo le tiene que pasar. Es imposible que se le haya olvidado tirar.
The trade deadline arrived and Fultz was shipped out to the Orlando Magic.
En Orlando lo hizo bien,
A heavily protected first-round pick. Philly was all in for a title run with their big four. They didn't have time to wait for Markelle to get better. For Fultz, Orlando seemed like a good spot. A team with much less media attention, who didn't have championship hopes. Hopefully here he can return to his number.
Sí, eso es verdad. Al final se va a un equipo más calmadito, ¿no? Un equipo más calmadito, un equipo en el que va a quedar abajo en las posiciones o va a quedar no muy arriba, no hay expectativas de anillo. Puede recuperarse bien, eso sí es verdad.
This trade represents the failure of what could have been. Fultz, Embiid, and Simmons were expected to be one of the best big threes the league had to offer. And instead, for whatever mysterious shoulder-related issue, it just couldn't come to fruition. The Sixers have never been the same. For years, they've lacked a shot-creating guard to lead their team. Markelle was supposed to be that guy.
Uf, qué duro, ese tiro. Este tiro es duro,
Markelle began working with the Magic staff to get healthy. He didn't play for the rest of the 2018-19 season, meaning he played 33 games total with the Sixers. 33. He never really got a fair chance to showcase his skills of why he was the #1 pick. and just as quickly as he was in Philly, he was out. Fultz made his Magic debut on October 23rd, 2019. He hit a few mid-range shots and threw down a vicious slam. The three-pointer, after 2.5 years, still remained a non-factor.
Es que era como un Rose, un Derrick Rose. Pasó a ser de un jugador que era muy completo, que era un Brandon Roy, que tiraba desde lejos, tiraba desde media distancia y era bueno penetrando, a totalmente no tirar de tres. Pero puede hacer esos mates tan increíbles y no podía tirar de tres, tío. Si es más, yo creo que es más sacrificado para el hombro, si lo tienes lesionado, pegarte esos mates tan bestias, tío.
No point in dwelling on the jump shot. Throughout the season, Fultz showed flashes, whether it was going toe-to-toe with LeBron James down the stretch.
Que es que lo hizo muy bien, lo estoy diciendo, lo hizo muy bien esa temporada en Orlando.
Markelle impressed many with his play and averaged career best numbers. 12 points a night on 47% shooting.
Está muy bien. 12 puntos, 47% de tiros de campo.
Disciplined defense and great mid-range shooting. He shot an ugly 26% from downtown. The only difference between
Ojo, no lo hemos visto, ¿eh? Los líderes de porcentaje de media distancia. El primero, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. ¡Qué jugador! ¡Qué jugador! Y encima ahora con Chet y toda la historia, que por cierto me bloquearon el vídeo. ¡Qué jugador! 80% de tiros de media distancia. Es una barbaridad. Es que el siguiente era Oladipo con un 66. ¡Qué jugador Gilgeous-Alexander! Shai es un jugadorazo. ¿Qué dinastía van a empezar a hacer los Oklahoma?
Philly was the fact that he simply attempted more threes. He was no longer hesitating as he once did.
Bueno, por lo menos tiraba.
Beyond the perimeter, he fired away. The weirdest part is that he was so damn good shooting mid-range shots. There were times when he would light up an opposing team with just jumpers. His free throws were vastly improved as well. Gone were the days of the double pump. Fultz shot 73% from the line, which was right around the league average.
Está bien, 73% de tiros de tiro libre siendo base y tal, está muy bien.
And the 8-seeded Magic squared off against the Bucks. Game 1 was unforgettable because Orlando shocked Milwaukee, absolutely dominating them, with Fultz putting up 15 points. It finally felt like he was a part of it.
En la burbuja parece que volvió, es verdad.
He was the quarterback to this upset victory. They ended up losing in 5. But Fultz played well in his first ever real playoff series. The narrative now surrounding Markelle is simple. He's a fine player without a three-point shot, a high-level bench player / low-level starter.
Es verdad, es que si no tiene triple, es lo que se decía en el vídeo que vimos el otro día de los triples, al final es que un base de ese calibre necesita tirar de tres, es que ni tira. Un jugador que casi ni tira de tres es, ya te digo, pues un jugador de un rol de banquillo o un titular de nivel bajo. Sí, sí, o sea, sí es lo que dices, sí. Si vuelve a tener triple y tal, gana la confianza o se recupera, podría hacer pupa, ¿eh?
Destroying the Washington Wizards and looking like a star in the making. He had no three-point shot, but it didn't look like he needed one.
Vaya pase, ¿eh?
On the stretch, he simply bulldozed the defense out of the way. Just a few games later, his knee collapsed.
Amigo.
The Magic were 6-2, number 1 in...
Los Magic es verdad, ¿eh? Es verdad que se lesionó, es cierto, ¿eh? El cruzado, niño.
Fultz had shown tons of progress, yet in the core of this success, we forgot about why we hadn't seen this progress in so long. Injuries. It was heartbreaking, and he's been recovering since January. This puts his future in a bit of a question mark. It's clear the talent is there, but he hasn't been healthy nearly as much as he should be to showcase what he's capable of. His game still has one glaring weakness, which is the lack of a three-point shot. And if he never develops that essential skill, he'll never reach the all-star potential he's capable of. As for my
literal, hasta que no tenga triple no podrá ser considerado casi un all-star, a ver si se recupera.
Somewhere along the line, he must have developed some shoulder issues, which then added a hitch to his shot. Instead of resting and waiting, he tried to play through it, thus developing a lack of confidence in his shooting ability. Once that shoulder issue went away, the mental block remained. And he has since not been able to get over it. He also
se juntó un poco el mental con el físico, ¿no? Sí, sí.
Shooting the ball from behind the perimeter. From 15 feet, the form looks beautiful. From 22 feet, it looks like he needs more oomph. He's also good at shooting off the dribble, which requires less thinking when putting the ball up compared to standstill.
O sea, literalmente podría tirar desde un paso más del triple y tiraría perfecto, pero tira desde el triple y no puede.
And he said it was an injury, so let's believe him. The Markelle Fultz saga is truly one of the most heartbreaking stories the NBA has ever seen.
La verdad es que sí,
The most hyped up prospects in years went from a surefire all-star compared to James Harden to forgotten by many in Orlando. There's still a real chance he blossoms into a star.
Mira, mira, o sea, es que el tío tenía la fuerza como para echar atrás a LeBron, que es un tanque.
Someone with as much talent as he possesses will always stick around, but it all resides on him developing a perimeter game. You can watch the NBA for the rest of your life, and you'll never see a story like Fultz's ever transpire again. It's now up to him to make that story have a good ending.
Es que nunca se ha visto algo así de que alguien haya olvidado cómo tirar. O sea, una cosa es que sea, pues mira, como Ben Simmons, ¿no? Que está aquí. Ben Simmons no tiraba, prácticamente, no ha tirado, no era tirador porque él no tiraba, se le daba bien pues ir para la canasta. Pues no tiraba. Otra cosa, y que de golpe empiece a tirar o lo que sea. Ese momento no pasa nada. Pero de ser un buen tirador de tres, porque era buen tirador en la universidad, a no tirar o fallar un montón o que la forma se vea distinta, eso nunca se había visto, tío. No sé, es curioso. Me gustaría saber qué opináis vosotros de la carrera de Markelle Fultz, si os ilusionaba, si ya le veíais que no pintaba bien, no sé, que me digáis en los comentarios, dejad un like, suscríbete y nos vemos en el siguiente vídeo. Chao.